Two young boys are trained over 18 years to become proficient martial arts warriors. What happens when they come into contact with one another? Who will win? Find out today on Around the Weird. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I've found in my travels. Today, I want to talk about a great book that I read. This one is a big recommend right out the bat, and it is about martial arts warriors and medieval China. I am referring to A Hero Born by Jin Yong, which was published in 1957. I am reading the English translation, which was translated by Anna Holmwood. For those who don't know, Jin Yong, or that was his pen name, his real name was Louis Cha. He was a Chinese writer who lived between the early 1900s and died in 2018. That's pretty recently. He was well regarded for writing wuxia, I believe I'm pronouncing that right. Wuxia fiction, basically martial arts, kung fu type fiction that is pretty big in Chinese culture. He wrote The Legend of the Condor Heroes, which is part of the series that I'm talking about. The English translation was separated into 4 parts, whereas the Chinese version is just the one book. But he later wrote like sequels to the story and other side stories, which some have said are interconnected in some ways. Pretty fascinating writer in that regard, regarded as like one of the big 3 of writing, those martial arts types fiction. And you can definitely see its influences in cinema, especially with the those Hong Kong Bruce Lee action thrillers of the 70s and the Jackie Chan movies that came later, and the Chinese fantasy movies as well. So a pretty interesting author. I don't know too much about Anna Holmwood. I know that she's translated a number of works and even translated other books in this series, but I don't know too much else about her. What she did say is that this is actually not her first time sort of working on A Hero Born. She tried an earlier translation that didn't really pan out because the action scenes were hard to write, but she feels that she got a little bit better with this version. So some success there, and I did enjoy it, but I should note that I'm talking about sort of like the English translation, so it's not exactly like, I don't think it'd be 100% accurate to what's going on in the original story. Some things might be lost in translation, and so I'm coming at this through the English translation, whereas if you really want authenticity, you'd probably go for that the Chinese version, which unfortunately I can't read Chinese. I should probably learn one of these days. Lastly, I just want to thank Lucas from the Bits of Lit for recommending this. It was a pretty solid book, and I am very thrilled to have read it. Kind of antsy about it going in because I didn't know if it was going to be as compelling as it was, but I was proven wrong there. And as I talk about this, I am going to spoil it in the summary section, so I'm going to encourage you to go read it afterwards. But if you want to like read it first and then come back and watch this video, go ahead and do that so that nothing is spoiled for you. But without further ado, let's talk about A Hero Born. I will read it, I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So A Hero Born takes place in medieval China around the 1100 or 1200s at the time of Genghis Khan's rising. And it initially focuses on Ironheart Yang and Sky Fury Guo, who are 2 loyal Chinese patriots of the Song Empire, although they are not happy that the Jin Empire is taking over things and the Song Empire is filled with corrupt officials. And they come into contact with a Taoist named Chuji, who is beating up corrupt Song officials. Yang and Guo help him bury some of the bodies, but one person manages to escape after Charity Bao kind of takes care of him overnight. And that dude ends up bringing Song government officials who demand Guo and Yang turn themselves in, but Guo and Yang don't do that, and a big fight ensues. They send their pregnant wives away, Lily Li and Charity, so that their children can be born and grow up to be wonderful patriots and whatnot. And Taoist Chuji even promises to help train them in the martial arts, which is pretty nice. Unfortunately, Guo dies, and it's presumed that Yang also dies in the ensuing fight. And Charity is left to travel with a man named Yan Li, who later reveals himself to be Prince Hong Li of the Jin. And she doesn't like that she's stuck with him. Meanwhile, Taoist Chuji is pursuing Justice Duan, who has Lily Li, Ironheart Yang's wife. And he tracks him down to a monastery, which is being sort of guarded by the 7 freaks of the South, 7 heroes of the South, who are martial arts warriors who are pretty proficient and just serve as a sort of martial family. Due to a misunderstanding, Chuji believes that the 7 freaks are hiding Duan, and a big fight ensues, which results in Chuji actually winning the fight. The freaks are embarrassed and don't want their reputation hurt, so they agree with Chuji to have a bigger fight down the road once they manage to save Guo and Yang's children. And the fight will apparently take place between those 2 children. Chuji tries to capture Duan at this point, but he manages to escape and takes Lily Li with him. And they cross the border into Mongolia. Lily Li manages to escape from Duan at this point, and Guo Jing is born, who is Sky Fury's son. He's raised in Mongolia and is in close contact with Temujin, who would later become Genghis Khan, and kind of becomes part of his family as well, becoming sworn brothers with his son, which is pretty cool. The 7 freaks eventually track down Guo Jing and decide to train him. In the process, one of their own dies at the hands of Hurricane Chen and his wife Mei, who are part of a sort of villainous kind of sect of martial arts warriors. And they manage to send off the Mei before she can attack even further. But they train Guo. He's not very proficient, and they're kind of disappointed in him overall, but they still train him and hope for the best for him. At the same time, they learn of Yang Kang, who is presumed to be Ironheart's son, and they hear that he is actually doing a really good job in his training, which disheartens them a little bit more. Very fortunately, another Taoist shows up and trains Guo in Ningong, which is controlling his breathing and makes him a little bit of a better warrior, which the freaks, the heroes, are happy about. Guo then learns that Temujin is going to be betrayed by some Jin Empire officials, Hong Li, who we met before, as well as some of his close family. And so Guo tells Temujin this, and Temujin manages to fend those people off and executes some of them and gains more power in the process. And at that point, Guo is made a prince, but he can't stay for very long, and he has to go off to the south to finally fight Yang Kang, Ironheart's son, as promised by the 7 freaks and Taoist Chuji. As he travels south, he encounters the demons, the 4 demons, who want to fight him because he's associated with the 7 freaks, but he's saved by Lotus Huang, who is a very beautiful young girl, but he presumes that she's a boy, which he doesn't learn until much later, and then finds her to be very beautiful. And Lotus doesn't really reveal too much about her background there. And then when Guo finally makes it to Jiangxing, one of the cities where he's supposed to do the fight, he encounters Prince Wanyan Kang, who is sort of insulting a man named Mu Yi, who's trying to give his daughter away in marriage. And Guo is trying to force Wanyan Kang into this marriage, but they end up having a fight, which no clear victor comes out of. And another Taoist ends up helping him. But the Taoist is hurt by a rival martial artist, and he needs some medicine that is only found in the prince's palace, which they have to sneak into, and they manage to grab. However, in the process, Guo manages to learn that Mu Yi is actually Ironheart Yang, and that the prince's consort, the prince's mom, is actually Charity, Ironheart's wife. And so they're reunited, which is great. But then we learn that the prince is Yang Kang, who is the guy or the boy that Guo is supposed to be fighting. And we also learn that the prince is kind of trying to make a deal with the Jin Empire. Sort of connections there, meaning that he might be on the wrong side of things. The prince stumbles upon all of this, including Ironheart Yang. And in an ensuing fight, Yang accidentally stabs his mother, which Ironheart then tries to flee with Charity, and presumably manages to make it out of the palace. And as the story comes to a close, Ironheart is fleeing, and Guo is chastising Yang for hurting his mother. There's still that fight that needs to take place, but it ends on a cliffhanger there. In terms of analysis, there is quite a bit we're talking about with A Hero Born. One of the themes that Yong is talking about here is that of heroism, and the heroic death. Jin Yong builds a martial arts kung fu world with heroes, a world where you have these people who are capable of great acts, who are capable of kung fu, which, according to Homewood and sort of the afterword, is more about sort of like a study that you do. Like kung fu isn't necessarily fighting, but it could be skills that you hone in an essence of fighting, which is a pretty interesting sort of difference. But all of these people have sort of built up their skills in order to make them powerful leaders, powerful fighters who are capable of affecting the outcomes of nations and whatnot. You see this with the 7 freaks, or the 7 heroes of the South, 7 martial arts warriors, later to turn out to be 6, who fight and pursue righteous sort of happenings in everything that they encounter. And you see that with Sky, Fury, and Ironheart, how they're fighting for their country. Specifically, they are labeled patriots, so kind of showing a connection between being a hero and serving your nation, which is kind of jingoistic when you think about it. And I would say this if it were an American thing too. It's like to say, like, in order to be a hero, you have to serve your country in some capacity. That is a bit jingoistic, but it's also very noble and honorable that if you see like people invading, people trying to hurt your country, standing up for it in some capacity is the right thing to do. And then, in addition to all of that, you also see Yong talk about the heroic death. If it reaches a point where you're no longer able to fight, if it appears that you're going to be defeated, you go through the heroic death. Rather than simply accepting a surrender, you fight until you can no longer do it anymore, and then comes the presumed killing blow. You see that with the 7 freaks. Sheng, I believe is his name. Like he's fighting Chen and Mei, and they end up killing him in a sad moment, but he fights to the very end. And Sky Fury Guo even does the same thing. He fights to help his wives escape from the soldiers, and fights to make sure that his children are eventually born and live a good life. They go through the heroic death. They give their life in service of something greater in that case. And what's also interesting is how the Empire seeks to woo heroes to their side. Like it's the 7 freaks, go throughout China, but the Jin and the Song dynasties woo them. Like they seek their help, they seek their aid in order to have powerful warriors who are fighting on their side. Because you can have soldiers, but you need these powerful martial arts warriors to train your soldiers, but also to change the tide in your favor. So a lot of value in having these heroes. And this also seems to all go back to the idea of honor, fighting nobly, not simply fighting, not cheating, but honoring your word, honoring your opponent as well. You can see that a couple times in the story, specifically when one character says they'll do something and they're like, oh, you got to do that now. You promised you don't want to give up your honor. And the other character, like, I don't want to lose face by this. I have to be honorable here. But other times characters are not noble and they cheat to win. They hurt others. They don't care who they hurt in the process. They are without honor, and that's explicitly said by many characters throughout the story. And I think a lot of this just goes back to ultimately portraying Chinese values. Especially in 1957 when this was written, we can get an insight into what the Chinese valued, how the Chinese saw like their greatest heroes, especially because this is about like medieval Chinese history. This is very similar to Americans writing about the American Revolution and the heroes that came from that. It's basically like an understanding of what values the Chinese culture has, but also where they came from and what they see their heritage as. Another interesting aspect of the story is the idea of sworn brotherhood. Jin shows the connection between two close friends, and he shows that it is pretty deep, especially when they forge a connection like this. You see this early in the story with Sky Fury and Guo, how they become sworn brothers, and it's a way to connect their family. Like basically they say, our wives are pregnant. If we have 2 sons, they too will be sworn brothers. This will be like a legacy that's passed down. And if we have 2 daughters, they will be sworn daughters. And if we have a son and a daughter, they will get married, and that will officially connect our family. Sworn brotherhood goes that deep. But you also see this in Mongolia in the story with Temujin and Bogurchi. They are pretty close together, willing to fight and defend each other when necessary. There's an interesting quote from this that I would like to read. Their arrows slayed hundreds of men, and together they recovered the horses. Temujin offered to give Bogurchi 4, but Bogurchi refused. This I did for friendship, nothing more. In one another they found a bond deeper than any other. And that's a good quote because it shows that Bogurchi and Temujin, like they fight for each other, they fight for friendship, and their connection is so closely connected, or like their connection is so deep that they're willing to do anything for one another, and they don't really seek a reward out of their friendship. Which is very beautiful. Like it's showing what kind of friendship exists, and you can have such a deep friendship and it not be considered emasculine or anything like that. Because I know we have toxic masculinity, but these sworn brotherhoods exist, which is a friendship that is intimate in many ways. And so you, essentially what I'm trying to get at is they would do anything for one another. And it's an extension of honor, that you honor the sworn brotherhood. You do anything for your sworn brother, and you're kind of disgraced if something bad happens to them and you were not one to step in, or if you betrayed them in some capacity, because there are some deep betrayals that exist in this story. You see this again with Temujin when the Jin Empire tries to ally itself against Temujin and try to raise up some other of the tribes in order to get at Temujin and prevent the Mongol Empire from connecting and being a threat to the Chinese. Like they seek Temujin's sworn brother. They seek Jamuka, and Temujin is deeply hurt that his brother would try to betray him in this capacity and choose these interlopers over him. And so when Temujin finally gains the upper hand, he jails Jamuka, but more than that, he executes him and he executes his family as a means to send a message that you do not like betray these connections, these relationships like sworn brotherhood. So I think that's a really good portrayal that Yang does of close familial or friendship, close familial friendships, and of those types. And then later in the story, or like throughout the story, we're led to see like Guo Jing. Yeah, there you go, Guo Jing. We're led to see him and Yang Kang. We're told that they're going to have a sworn brotherhood, but it's kind of a sworn brotherhood that never was. So a bit tragic, maybe even a little bit Shakespeare in a way. I feel like it's wrong to apply the Shakespeare moniker here, but it's family drama essentially. Like these two were supposed to be close friends, but now they're on the opposite ends of the spectrum, and it seems like Guo isn't going to be able to help Yang get on the straight and narrow, and it seems like Yang isn't going to be able, or like he's going to betray Guo in some way because he has close connections to the Jin Empire. Whether or not that's going to happen remains to be seen. We'll have to find out in future volumes of this series. But I very much look forward to that because it's high drama. It's very emotional drama, especially considering the sworn brotherhood and the what was sort of foreseen for these two, that they were going to be so close together, but unfortunately circumstances tore them apart. Yong also talks about perseverance here, which is very cool. Guo Jing is portrayed as this incompetent buffoon sometimes. Not that incompetent. Like, he can fight, but he's not as proficient as the seven freaks. He's not as talented. He doesn't have that innate strength that others might have, that Yang Kang might even have. And so he has to work at it a little bit harder. He has to build up his Negong, which is his inner strength, his inner breathing and whatnot. And that helps him a little bit, but it doesn't make him the perfect warrior. He has a lot of struggles throughout this series. And I think that's a very good kind of message, very good character development to have in this story, that Guo Jing has to try a little bit harder because he's not instantly great. That this requires a bit more practice, and that's great for anyone who's reading this. Like, especially if you're a young adult and you see like, oh, I guess I won't be great instantly at everything I do. I'll have to try a little bit harder. And then there's other interesting elements of the story too, including the focus on ethnic identity, the northern Jin and the Mongolians, and also the southern Song Empire, sort of like the explaining how China got to where it was, but also the value of the cultural sort of ethnic identity there. Maybe Yang will go into it in more detail in future volumes, but it's interesting to see where it's starting and how it might come into play later. And then also the fight scenes are particularly well depicted, especially the fight between Taoist Chuji and the Seven Freaks, just him battling it out against each and every one of the Seven Freaks and trying to hold his own, which he manages to do. And then Sky Fury Guo and Ironheart Yang fighting against the soldiers, and really any fight that Guo Jing comes up against. It's really well written. I have to applaud Anna Holmwood, because I'm sure it's one thing in Chinese, but to have to translate that and make sure that it's consistently good and also true to what's being said in the original Chinese, that's no easy feat. So that's where handy and an effective translator comes into play. And there are a couple of issues that I have with The Hero Born, not enough to sink it or anything, but I do feel like I was lied to about Yang Kang, because in the middle of the story, while Guo Jing is in Mongolia, he's told about Yang Kang, who's a very competent fighter, but we're never told that he's a prince. And I feel like that's something that you would probably have to say, that would come into play. And also, how did Taoist Chuji train Yang Kang in the first place? That's it seems like the palace officials maybe wouldn't let Chuji do that. So I feel like there were some lies there that need to be addressed in the next book in order for it to make a little bit more sense. And then another issue that I have is that I do feel like the book was leading up to the big fight between Yang Kang and Guo Jing. Like, we were told that this big fight that was going to take place, and I was really eager for it, and then it ends on the cliffhanger. You see a little bit of a fight between the two, but it wasn't like, oh, we know who we are, and this is the big fight that will determine whose reputation is saved between Taoist Chuji and the Seven Freaks. I felt like we were getting that fight, and maybe it's all one sort of thing in the original story, The Legend of the Condor Heroes, because it's just one installment in the original Chinese, but maybe in the translation it has to be a cliffhanger. But I do think that this was gearing up to be the end of the story, this big fight, and instead we just get this cliffhanger, which again, it isn't enough to sink it, but it's just an issue that I have. I guess I really wanted to see this big fight. Anyway, those are my thoughts on A Hero Born by Jin Yong and translated by Anna Holmwood. A pretty amazing book. I would say a perfect book, in my opinion. One that is particularly well written. It's well paced. There's a lot of energy, there's a lot of excitement, and a lot of mystery in this story. It's a perfect action adventure type story, which I haven't encountered a lot of recently. I've been really craving one of those stories that get me hooked, and I'm like stuck on every single word, and I don't feel like that's really happened since War and Peace. But even then, I wasn't really like hooked on every single thing that Tolstoy was saying, unfortunately. But I still enjoyed it. But here, it's just I love it, and I want more of it, and I will definitely read more in the near future. I have some other books that I need to get to, but I know that I'm going to be reading the sequels in a matter of a few weeks or a couple months. And so again, I definitely recommend this to you out there. Find it at your local library, but also maybe go out and buy it. This is something that definitely deserves more attention and a spot on your bookshelf, in my opinion. And again, thanks to Lucas from the Bits of Lit for recommending such a high quality and superb and all the superlatives type of book. It has changed me for the better. I am all the greater for having read it. If you have any thoughts on it, let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear from you and just get your thoughts on what you think of this book. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this author of this book if they do not already know. And join the Discord if you want to have further conversations about wuxia or Chinese martial arts literature or media in general. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and wuxia travels. Farewell.